Welcome to Therapist Podcast. I'm Dr. Peter King and I'm your host. The Therapist Podcast is intended for mental health professionals. We offer a series of podcasts from a range of clinicians in different areas. We'll discuss current clinical practice, research, publications, and basically anything in a fairly casual, relaxed environment. This week I'm joined by Dr. Lillian Nejad. Lillian's a registered clinical psychologist and author with over 20 years' experience in the assessment and treatment of individuals with mild to severe psychological issues and disorders. A significant proportion of Lillian's work has been in specialist and senior psychologist positions within the public mental health services. She's also held lecturer positions with Monash University, teaching in the clinical doctorate of psychology and the Masters of Health Psychology programs. Lillian uses a range of therapeutic approaches and specialises in areas of CBT for anxiety and depression. She uses dialectical behaviour therapy for borderline personality disorder and relaxation and mindfulness techniques to manage stress and enhance well-being. Lillian's also a published author, with the most recent offering being Life Blockers, the Sleep Edition. We'll be talking briefly about life blockers today. She also published or co-published Treating Stress and Anxiety, a Practitioner's Guide to Evidence-Based Treatments, and has recently launched Coping with Anxiety in Tough Times with Insight Timer, so I'll be interested in talking to Lillian about that as well. Lillian's currently in private practice in the Bayside region of Melbourne. Welcome, Lillian. Let's get straight into it. Tell me a little bit about life blockers.
Life blockers is a concept that I kind of coined to mean any obstacles that get in the way of pursuing what you want in life or doing what you want to do. And I was trying to think of I wanted to write a series of books. That was the idea.
Yep.
And I thought I had a lot of content on sleep. And so I thought I would start with that because having insomnia is like the ultimate life blocker.
Most definitely, yep.
Because it just gets in the way of everything. It gets in the way of how you think. It can affect your emotions. It can certainly affect how you are during the day.
And your mental state.
Everything.
So
I thought, well, let's start with that.
Yeah.
So that's why it's called Life Blocker, the Sleep Edition. It's about how to overcome insomnia.
And I understand that you've just recorded a new Insight Timer course. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So if people aren't familiar with Insight Timer, it is... it's an app. It's a mindfulness and relaxation app, and it's the most widely used one in the world. It has a lot of free mindfulness and relaxation exercises, and I have a few of mine on there for free that you can listen to. But they have just over the last year or so launched their courses.
Yep.
And their courses are, they tend to be 10 sessions for about 10 to 15 minutes each on various topics. So I've just launched one called Coping with Anxiety in Tough Times, because right now we're going through a pretty tough time.
True.
But it's not just a coronavirus course. It's actually for any challenging times that you face in life. Of course, it will be relevant now.
Yep.
While people are going through such difficulties and such a strange kind of period in their lives, but it's actually relevant for any challenges that anyone will face, because we all face those challenges in life.
And so from my understanding, they're like 15 minute.
They're 10 to 15 minute audio lessons.
Sure.
Each lesson will kind of focus on a kind of different topic related to the overall topic.
Sure.
So a lot of this course is about... All of my courses are really about presenting evidence-based skills and strategies.
Sure.
This one is looking at both the acceptance pathway to deal with challenging times and the change pathway to deal with challenging times.
So similar to DBT then, is it? So more acceptance-based strategies, radical acceptance-based strategies, or?
A lot has to do with that. I think that the way that I work, I incorporate a lot of DBT into it, because I just think it's so helpful and so skills-focused.
Yes.
And it does a really great job of balancing acceptance and change, which some other therapies don't do. I also do incorporate CBT because obviously that's a really evidence-based approach for anxiety.
Sure.
It tends to be more change-focused. And then I do incorporate some acceptance and commitment therapy concepts and positive psychology in there. So anything that's kind of evidence-based and relevant, I'll pull from those sorts of things and put in there. But I'd say, yes, probably the first 4 lessons are very much acceptance focused.
Sure.
Validating how you feel, making sure that you know that it's actually reasonable to feel stressed and anxious
given
at this
that
time.
I feel stressed and anxious this time, it seems reasonable given that I'm isolated.
Yeah, there's under the current circumstances, it makes perfect sense for all of us to have a heightened level of anxiety.
Sure.
So to spend a lot of time like telling ourselves that we shouldn't feel that way or to feel guilty about feeling that way, it's just piling more emotional kind of baggage on top of anxiety. You don't want to feel anxiety and guilt and frustration.
Sure.
Why not just feel anxiety?
Yeah. Focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm really interested in hearing that you're talking about skills. So is this approach suggesting that we focus on behaviours and applying skills to behaviours, or is it looking at the reasons behind these behaviours?
I think it kind of encompasses both of those things.
Sure.
I think we start with understanding the nature of anxiety, why we have it, what's the purpose of it, not looking at it as a bad emotion or a negative emotion, which most people seem to think that it is.
Sure.
And to actually see it for what it is, which is our protector. It's there to protect us. There are times where it's dysfunctional and we need to do stuff about that.
Yeah.
So some of those things are going to be behavioral things.
Yeah.
In fact, for anxiety, the most kind of effective methods are often behavioral. So learning how to use mindfulness, learning how to use relaxation strategies, learning that doing those healthy things and challenging things are really helpful. Learning not to avoid things that make you anxious.
And so this is the other thing is that I imagine there's times that you'd suggest to your clients that there are times to avoid and then there are other times to approach. So there's other times to experience the emotion, to notice where this emotion's coming from, what's impacting it, and other times to actually say, hey, let's put that aside right now and not deal with it.
Yeah, I think one of the lessons I really focus on, how can you tell when your anxiety is helping you and when it's hindering you?
Yeah.
And getting people to really think through like 5 different questions that they can ask about their anxiety to work out like in what ways is this helping me and in what ways is it. And often people will find out that it's doing both. And so
it's serving both.
It's serving, it is helping in some ways, and in some ways it's hindering. And then working out ways to change the aspects that are hindering you.
Sure.
And I think that's probably one of the most useful things to learn because it just gives you so much more awareness about what's going on.
So let's talk about that awareness. When do you think that it's really helpful for the individuals that you're working with to recognise that anxiety is a positive motivator right now? Can you think about times that your clients have identified that anxiety can be productive?
Yeah, look, I think we definitely should be focusing on that up front. First session in treatment, first lesson is anxiety is not bad and it's not negative. If you try to get rid of it, you will die.
Yeah, exactly.
You need it to survive.
It motivates behavior, doesn't it?
Yeah. It does, it does a few things.
Yeah.
One of the most important things is that motivates us to take action to protect ourselves.
Sure.
And if it's doing that, it's doing its job. It also helps, as you know, through DBT, I love the way they explain it, it helps communicate to us that something's happening that we think is threatening. Whether we perceive that correctly or not is a question we need to ask ourselves. But when we feel anxious, it's because we feel we're under threat in some way.
And so it puts in place our balance and checks. We make sure that our environment's safe and a whole range of things.
So you need, exactly. Yep. And then it's also communicating to others. So when we feel anxious, how are we behaving? How are we acting? What do we look like?
Yep.
What's our nonverbal expression of anxiety?
Sure.
And that can be really helpful. Like some people don't like that aspect, right? They feel self-conscious if they appear anxious, but it's actually a way of getting help from people as well. So
certainly.
We need to be able to express that.
Yep.
So those are the kinds of questions that I'm trying to get people to ask themselves.
Sure.
Like one is the level of my anxiety, does it match the circumstances?
Yeah.
Does it make sense? And sometimes that can be hard to work out.
And does it make sense right now?
Does it make sense right now? What would, if you saw somebody else reacting in that way, what would you think? Would you think that it's too intense or severe or just right or even below? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah.
If you think it's too high for the situation, then that's something to work on. How do you dial down that intensity? It doesn't mean take it away completely. It just means dial it down. Another question is, like, what is it communicating to you? Is it accurate communication? Yeah. Or is it an exaggeration? Is it catastrophizing? Kind of learning how to evaluate that a little bit better. Not just believing that every thought that goes through your mind or your feeling of anxiety is a kind of a representation of factual kind of threat in your life. And then is it communicating to others in a way that's helping you or hindering you? And then also really thinking about, like what you were saying, what is it motivating you to do? Is it motivating you to do things that are taking you towards your goals? Or is it taking you away from your goals? Yep. And is it making you do things that are towards your values and in line with your values? Or is it taking you away from how you would like to live your life? And so the answers to those questions should help people really understand, is this helping me or not, and what can I do about it?
So it's gaining a lot more insight into what's happening for you right now.
Exactly.
So knowing you for a little while, you provide a bit of supervision to clinicians, but also you've taught psychology students in the past. Mm-hmm. What do you think one of the main challenges for beginning practitioners are in working with anxiety?
Probably managing their own anxiety.
So, yeah. Our own performance anxiety, yes.
I think that is the ultimate thing, because I think new practitioners are in their heads a lot because they want to be as good as they can be. And so they're worried, about saying the right thing or doing the right thing or giving enough or not giving enough. And if they're spending all that time thinking about what's next or, then they're not really listening to that person. They're not being mindful of what's going on in the session. And that's problematic. Yeah. That's where the problems are.
So being more aware, being present, not worrying so much about what's the next thing to say, but focusing on what's happening now with the individual you're working with.
What's happening now, and trusting that you know enough to be able to cope with whatever happens.
Sure.
And that mistakes are okay.
Yeah.
You can repair mistakes.
And I think that that's one thing that DBT taught me pretty quickly, is mistakes are okay.
Yeah.
And everyone knows you're making them anyway. Mm-hmm. So you might as well bring them up and address it and repair or address what's happening right now.
And it's such good modeling for your clients to see, like, you're not a perfect person. I think sometimes people, they kind of exaggerate. Yeah. Like the therapist is this person that behaves perfectly all the time and knows and no, we do not behave perfectly all the time.
We're human beings.
Yeah, we have all the same emotions. And we might know the strategies and skills to help ourselves, but that doesn't mean we're always using them.
Yeah.
And that's we can be quite willful about that too. Like,
most definitely.
Right? We know that sometimes the way that we're communicating isn't effective, but we're doing it anyway because we're just in that mood to do it.
Yeah.
And we have those experiences. And so if we make mistakes with our clients and then we, apologize or acknowledge and repair, then they know that, that's possible. That is, one, it's okay to make mistakes. Two, your therapist isn't perfect. And three, you can repair relationships if you make mistakes.
And as you mentioned, that's great modeling.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to teach in a lot of sessions, isn't it?
That's exactly right.
And this really does lead well into the sleep edition of Life Blockers, because anxiety can play a really big part in insomnia.
That's right. And it's one of the, I think, biggest factors in insomnia that isn't often treated.
Yeah.
Because people are so quick to go to medications and kind of go for the quick fix to relieve their insomnia rather than looking at, what's actually causing the insomnia. And it's kind of like worries about getting to sleep are often what keeps you from sleeping.
Yeah.
So, and it can be worries about your day as well. Like what's going on in your life can definitely get in the way of sleep. And sometimes short-term insomnia is kind of just a normal response to stressful circumstances in your life.
Yeah.
Like it's normal to have a day here and there where you can't sleep. And that might be because something really stressful is happening, or it might be because something's really exciting that's going on in your life, and it just, hypes you up so much that you can't get your mind to quiet. And that's okay every once in a while. It's just when it lasts very long that you need to start doing something about it.
And this is the value of having some level of awareness, what is going on in your life, or mindfulness, and that mindful awareness, rather than, I think a lot of people see mindfulness as, the Zen master, breathing half an hour, but the value of mindfulness to me is being present and aware.
It is, and that's what I really like to impart to people too, that mindfulness doesn't have to be so complicated. It's actually quite simple and elegant almost. It's just noticing on purpose without judgment and not without trying to change it. That is it.
Yep.
And you can do that in a really practical way. I actually call it practical mindfulness.
Yeah.
And I say you can do it for as long as you want, wherever you want, whenever you want, in any position you want. You don't have to be in the lotus position. You don't have to be uninterrupted by yourself. You can actually do it anywhere.
You can have a mindful conversation.
That's exactly right.
You can be here, present, off social media, not worrying about distractions. You might hear trains or a loud car go by, but then you remind yourself to be here right now.
Yeah.
I'm here in this conversation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of myths about mindfulness that keep people from trying it, and we need to remove kind of those obstacles for people, because they're, we can apply mindfulness in such a practical way, and it's so effective.
Yeah. So what got you into this area? What got you into the area of working with anxiety and mindfulness? What perked your interest?
You know what? I was exposed to working with mindfulness really early as a student.
Okay.
I didn't realize how big it was going to get and what the applications would be in the beginning. But when I was a student, I was working in a community health service, and I was tasked to run stress management groups for the community, which is where I got my group work. Love for group work was from that. And in my lessons, one of the sessions was about chronic pain. And as you know, John Kabat-Zinn started using mindfulness initially for chronic pain.
Sure.
And so I showed, my supervisor at the time showed me the video of John Kabat-Zinn delivering mindfulness to people with chronic pain, and I would show that to my students or my clients in the lesson, and then we would talk about how feeling your pain and not trying to get rid of it can actually help relieve the pain. Yeah. And that was my first, foray into mindfulness.
Yeah.
And, and then doing the stress and anxiety management was just, a follow-on from that. I just became more and more involved in doing group work and working with clients in those areas. And then when I went to work for public mental health, it just so happened that they had just received training in DBT and had started a full DBT program.
Okay.
So I had access to people who had been fully trained, and it was a fantastic program that involved a lot of professional development for me. And I was thrown straight into skills training and just kind of learned on the job how to do it.
I get a lot of people asking me which is the best way to learn the skills, and you're right, jumping in and teaching the skills is the best way, and using them yourself.
Exactly. I mean, it's the benefits for the therapist. I mean, I think that's why I found it so useful to use DBT for all of my clients, not just people with BPD or with chronic suicidal and self-harm behaviors, but it really does apply to anyone. Yep. And I learned that through doing it myself, because when I ran it, and this might be the same when you run it, is the facilitators would do the homework along with the clients to show them, we were committed to this as
Modeling
well.
behavior again.
We were learning this as well. And especially when we were just starting out, you're quite transparent with your clients that, this is your first time going through this as well, and we're all kind of in this together. And the amount of, you just get so much from it when it's on your mind. Yep. It really does improve your own sense of well-being and awareness and presence and all of that with your home life, with your work life, with everything. So I think it's just helpful for everybody. And
I would imagine that that's held you in good stead for these times now with COVID-19 as well, with making changes and just being aware that we have to make changes as clinicians, don't we?
Yeah, I think, being able to adapt to change, being more resilient, just being able to accept things the way that they are without
Yeah.
trying to fight it. I think that's probably one of the biggest, best skills that DBT offers. It's that radical acceptance. Like, this is just the way it is. There's a reason why it's this way.
Yep.
And we need to just accept that now, because if we don't accept it, we just cause more suffering and more pain for ourselves.
Sure.
Like, we're in pain, all of us.
Yep.
And let's just stick with the pain. It's just like, let's stick with the anxiety and not pile all this other stuff on top of it.
So be aware of the pain
Yeah.
and be aware of what's coming.
Because then you can change it
Yeah.
if you're aware of it fully.
So talking about change, how have you changed your practice in the last month? Your clinical practice?
Yeah, I switched very quickly. I was very lucky that I already have a really good software program that I was using, and that software program integrated telehealth into it.
Sure.
So I was able to just use that platform. It's called CoView.
Yep.
On Halaxy, which is the software program that I use. So it's all integrated together. So I was able to switch pretty quickly. I think the hardest part was communicating all this new information to my clients.
Sure.
Because we were getting information like on a daily basis. This is what it is now. This is what it is now. You know, like it kept changing. And I'd be sending these like long, detailed emails to my clients and then having to say, okay, it's changed now. This is what it is now. But yeah, I just converted to telehealth pretty quickly. My clients have been adapting really well.
Yeah.
I think the DBT skills that we've learned in sessions prior to this have really helped them stay resilient through this. And I've been super impressed with my clients and how they've been able to kind of manage themselves through this as well.
Because in a number of supervision sessions I've had with clinicians over the last month, one of the main concerns is there's that person's not in the room with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenge for a lot of clinicians. But if you do have those DBT strategies and the language that we use in DBT or CBT or ACT or whatever it is, you've got a common language you can use to actually help the individual you're working with identify how they're going right now. Because there's a lot of cues that we don't get from telehealth.
I think a lot of it also depends on what stage of treatment you were with your clients too. Like if you've got a brand new client, like I just saw a brand new client who wanted to wait till we could see each other in person, but then finally was like, I don't know when that's going to be, so I'll see you for my first session online. And I'm going to say it was a lot more difficult to connect than it is with my clients that I've seen many times before.
So what did you find particularly challenging with connecting with someone for the first time online?
I think you just don't know them as well, so your rapport isn't quite there yet. I think also with, I think because you're in this particular circumstance and you know that your client has maybe waited a really long time.
Sure.
And they also didn't want to start this way.
Yeah.
Then you're wanting to kind of maybe deliver more than you would normally in a first session. Like a first session's normally like get to know you session, find out what's going on session. But I found myself really wanting to do and give more, which is, you know, it's good intentions, but I think sometimes that's not what you're meant to be. You know, like it's not the best way to start.
So first of all, we need to, you know, get the commitment of somebody, make sure somebody is aware of your methods, a whole range of things.
Yeah, that's right.
It
like
makes sense.
And you know, we did do that in a way, but it was much more cursory maybe than I would have done it in a normal kind of first session. So I think, I mean, that's for me to kind of think about and ponder over and talk to my supervisor about.
Sure. And I think one of the other interesting things that I've found in therapy online is I find the sessions seem to be more compact. I don't always get to the 50 minutes or an hour with somebody. It seems to be, I think we do deliver a lot more when we're talking online, whether it's an existing client or not.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been running workshops for this company online.
Yep.
And I've never done that online before. Like, you know, you're delivering a training session for an hour for 40 people that you can't see.
Yeah.
And I was worried when I was trying to develop the content for it that I had too much. I always have too much content. That's always my problem. But in this virtual situation where there's not any real interaction, there's no one asking you questions throughout or making comments. Really, it's very rare.
Yep.
Unless you solicit it yourself, that you actually get through way more content. Which was good for me because I always have that content to give. But I was like, oh my gosh, like You can fit a lot more in the virtual context.
I think you can. I really do.
Yeah.
And I think that happens in therapy as well as teaching. And I think that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the majority of what I wanted to cover today.
Oh, well, I appreciate you asking me to talk about it.
Thanks for coming.
No problem.
Cheers.
Bye.
Well, that was great. Thank you, Lillian. Great insights into anxiety and also some suggestions for beginning practitioners. Please follow us. Plenty more podcasts on the way. Comment below. Any suggestions, more than happy to take them on. I'll put Lillian's links down below to her books, clinical practice, and a range of other videos that Lillian has available. Please look after each other, be careful. Hope everyone's safe and well during these challenging times.